Hello, Miss Winelander here. This is our second Need to Know video for Algebra 1A. So this is Unit 2, Lesson 2, Order of Operations and Evaluating Expressions. This is part of that modified plan where you do not have to do the first few pages in your Connexus lesson. This replaces the instruction and the practice, and then you have to go to the last page there to complete your assessment, your quick check in this case. So today's objective is to simplify expressions involving exponents and to use the order of operations to evaluate expressions. So how will you know when you've achieved this? What's the success criteria? Well, you'll know if you can check off, I can simplify a numerical expression using the order of operations, and I can evaluate an algebraic expression for given values using the order of operations. So there's some keywords in there we want to make sure we're clear on. One is base. So when you have an exponent, that's that little number that appears on the top here. In this case, that would be the 3. That tells you how many times to multiply the base as a factor. So in this case, the base would be 2. That's why 2 to the third power, or 2 cubed, is 2 times 2 times 2. That whole entire thing, 2 to the third, is called a power. So it has two parts. The parts are the exponent, that little number at the top that tells you how many times to multiply that larger number of the base. That's 3 of your keywords. The one is evaluate and is simplify. So to simplify a numerical expression, you replace it with a single numerical value. So in this case, 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So that's 8. You simplified it. And then you'd replace it with its simplified version. To evaluate is when there's an equal sign somewhere. You need to make sure you can substitute something into a variable to figure out this, to then simplify. So a lot of times you'll evaluate to simplify, or you can simplify by combining like terms and things and then evaluate. But there's slight differences there that sometimes people will say the wrong word. So now you know which word to say correctly. All right, we'll get started here. So again, as a reminder, we're going to go through 3 main problems from the lesson. I'm going to explain how to solve them, ask you to pause and solve a similar question so you can practice, get your brain thinking about it. Those practice problems that you're going to be completing throughout the video, that is what you will turn in at the end of the unit for your sample work. So you want to make sure that you're writing these down and keeping them in a safe space. So the first problem is simplifying powers. So what is the simplified form of this expression? The first one is 10 to the 7th power. Again, that exponent is 7. Your base is 10. So that exponent of 7 tells you how many times you multiply the base. 7 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you're familiar with your tens, you can figure out how many kind of zeros there are there, or you can always use your calculator to simplify and get your final number here. For problem 2, we have 0.2 to the 5th power, or 2/10 to the 5th power. Remember that the exponent is 5, the base is 2/10, so it tells you you need to multiply 2/10 by itself 5 times. So 2/10 times 2/10 times 2/10 times 2/10 times 2/10. And you can type that all in your calculator and you'll get 0.00032. So now pause the video and try these on your own. Remembering that that exponent is that little number at the top that tells you how many times do you multiply that base of that larger number. Another thing that we mentioned in this video, now that you're back from practicing that first one, is order of operations. So it might be something you've heard of before. Sometimes people have heard of it as PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or something similar. it's telling you what order math questions are solved in so that everyone gets the same answer. We want it to be that universal language so that you, me, someone across the world, someone 100 years ago, someone 10 years in the future, we all get the same answer no matter when we're solving it. So what you're going to do is you're going to solve operations inside grouping symbols first. So it would be parentheses, it would be brackets, it would be a fraction bar. So grouping symbols first. Then you're going to simplify powers. So that's making sure if you ever see an exponent, that little number at the top, that you work on simplifying that next. Then you multiply and divide from left to right. So sometimes you might do multiplication first, sometimes division first. You're looking for both of those operations, whatever one comes first from left to right. And then you go to addition and subtraction, again from left to right. So sometimes you might do subtraction first, sometimes addition. It's whatever appears first reading left to right. So let's try using this. So we're going to simplify a numerical expression. So what is the simplified form of each expression? So we'll start with 6 minus 2 squared divided by 2. So when we have order of operations here, we have parentheses. First, grouping symbols. Well, I see 6 minus 2. 6 minus 2 is 4, so I'm going to write that in place of the 6 minus 2. So I'm showing my work in this organized method that helps me keep track of what I'm doing. Next, I do see an exponent. I do see there's a power here. The exponent is 2, so what is 4 to the second, or 4 squared? That's 4 times 4, or 16. Oh, I just realized I wrote it down wrong. To the third power, so that's something to remember, is make sure you're doing the correct thing there. So it is not 16, it is 4 times 4 times 4. So it's 64. So we have 64, still divided by 2. We rewrite the whole thing to keep track. Next we go to multiplication and division, left to right. So that's 64 divided by 2, which is 32. So we've simplified our expression. It's a lot simpler, a lot easier to write down 32 than it is to write down 6 minus 2 to the third divided by 2. So we'll do that again for B. So let's write out our original first. We have 2 to the fourth minus 1, all of that divided by 5. So our first part is looking at our grouping symbols. I don't see parentheses, I don't see brackets, but I do see a fraction bar. So that lets me know that I have to do everything in the numerator first, and then everything in the denominator, and then I can divide the two. So let's approach that numerator, that top part first. What I see there is the next part, which is exponent. I see a power, 2 to the fourth. So that'd be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 again is 16. So you'd write 16 minus 1, all divided by 5. Again, we're still working just on that numerator, just on that grouping. So next we do 16 minus 1. So yes, addition and subtraction comes after multiplication and division, but we're working through that very first part of the grouping symbol in the numerator, so we have to do that first. So 16 minus 1 is 15. So we have 15 divided by 5. Now that we've simplified both the numerator and the denominator, both groupings, now we can approach multiplication and division. 15 divided by 5 is 3. All right, so now you're going to try this on your own. I recommend, just like what I did, write down PEMDAS at the top of your paper to kind of keep track of what you're following. But remember that P stands for parentheses, or brackets, or fraction bars, any grouping symbols. So again, try number 2 here. We have part A, B, and C. Pause the video and try that right now. That helps your brain go through this information. Keep it in a safe spot, hopefully on your note-taking guide that you have open, so that you can turn all of your practice problems in from the unit at the end in the sample work. Alright, welcome back. Remember when we briefly talked about evaluate at the beginning of the video? This is what your textbook has to say to define it. So it's an algebraic expression by replacing each variable with a given number. So again, that's why I said you substitute a number in. And then you're going to simplify using order of operations. So let's practice. So we're going to practice with number 3, evaluating algebraic expressions. What is the value of the expression for x equals 5 and y equals 2? Right, so let's work through this. So the first one we have x squared plus x minus 12 divided by y squared. Alright, so first thing, let's substitute in. Anytime it says x, we're not writing x anywhere, we're writing 5 because we know x is equal to 5. Oh, now I got to y, and now I'm going to substitute in 2 for y. So anytime you see y, you should write down 2. Now that we have our expression, now we can start simplifying it, making it look easier to kind of look at. Like, I don't know what that number is off the top of my head. So we got to use order of operations to do that. So do we have any grouping symbols first? I don't see any grouping symbols. Do we have any exponents and powers? Yeah, I see a couple of those. So I see 5 squared, so that's 5 times 5. That's 25. The next grouping symbol I see is 2 squared, so 2 times 2, which is 4. So I'm going to substitute that in. So instead of writing 5 squared, I'm going to write down 25. That organizes your work in a consistent manner so you can keep track of what you're doing. Next, I'm going to look for multiplication and division left to right. So as I go across, I see 12 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So I'll write down everything else and substitute in 12 divided by 4 with a 3. I don't see any more multiplication or division, so I go to addition and subtraction. 25 plus 5, which is 30, minus 3 is 27. So that's our final answer for part A. Now let's do part B. So that is x, y squared. And again, we're going to evaluate, so we're going to substitute in the values we know for each of these variables, and then simplify. And when we see that it says x, y right next to each other, think about what does that mean? When you see a variable next to a number, or two variables next to each other, it's meaning multiply. You're going to multiply those together. So we're talking about the product of x and y. So when we substitute in 5 for x, and 2 for y, it's not 52, it's 5 times 2. So 5 times 2 squared. So let's follow the order of operations in order to simplify this. Do we see any grouping symbols? Yep, I see parentheses there. So 5 times 2 is 10. So I'm going to replace 5 times 2 with 10. Now go to exponents and power. So I see any of those? I do. I see 10 squared. So remember that exponent 2 tells you how many times to multiply the base of 10. So it's 10 times 10. 10 times 10 is 100. So that would be your final answer. So now you're going to want to try this on your own to see if you do understand this. It's a good check. And then you're also going to have to turn in this practice problem at the end of the unit for your sample work. So look through number 3. You're going to evaluate. That means you're going to take the values for a variable, substitute it in, and then simplify by following the order of operations for part A and B. So pause the video now. Alright, welcome back. You are now completed with the practice problems within the video for Need to Know 2 for Algebra 1A, Unit 2, Lesson 2. So now you've watched 2 videos. You have 6 total practice problems completed. You have 6 problems done for your sample work assignment at the end of the unit. But just because they're done doesn't mean we've mastered the skills yet, so let's kind of review. So check these off if you feel like you can answer it with confidence. So I can simplify a numerical expression using the order of operations. If you can, check it off. If you can't, rewind this video, go back and watch some parts again. Go to your textbook or ask a teacher. Find some way so you are able to check this off. Same with I can evaluate an algebraic expression for given values using the order of operations. So your exit ticket at the end of the video is to go to masteryconnect.com/bubblesheet, enter in the test ID that will be on your note sheet, enter in your student ID, so it's found at the top of your gradebook there, and then answer the questions. Remember, this video replaced the instruction in your lesson and the practice problems because you practiced those 3 main problems there, the biggest problems from today's lesson. So in Connexus, just go to the end of the lesson and complete your quick check and you are done with math for the day. I'll see you next lesson.